about the schedule. On July 10th and 11th in Kuala Lumpur, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will participate in regular meetings of the foreign ministries of the Association of Southeast Asian in the formats of Russia, ASEAN, East Asia Summit and ASEAN Regional Forum. We'll publish more information about it on our website and in the official accounts in social networks. On the sidelines of the ASEAN events, the minister will have a number of meetings with his Asian counterparts. Sergei Lavrov on July 11th and 12th will visit the Korean People's and Democratic Republic with a visit to have negotiations within the second round of strategic dialogue at the level of foreign ministers. On July 14th and 15th, foreign minister will participate in the meeting of the Council of Foreign Ministers of Member States of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This will be a key stage to the preparation to the SCO summit. It will take place on August 30th, September the 1st in the city of Tianjin. They will discuss the current state of affairs and prospects of the further development and advancement of the organization. Let's move to the relevant agenda. I would like to start with the terror attacks of the Kiev regime in Kursk and Rilsk. On July the 8th, when Russia celebrated a bright holiday, the day of family, love and fidelity, Ukrainian Nazis with limitless cruelty made two targeted drone attacks against the city beach in the city of Kursk. There were a lot of people with children there. They knew those Ukrainian neo-Nazis who they were going to strike. 3 men were killed, including a law enforcer. He helped to evacuate people from the beach during the second cynical attack. 7 people were wounded, including a 5-year-old boy. The same very day, Banderovets struck with drones the civilian facilities of the city of Rilsk. The building for communicable diseases unit of the Central Regional Hospital and ambulance building, 2 women were wounded. We express heartfelt condolences to the loved ones of those killed and wounded during this terrible terror attacks. We call on the sensible part of the international community who is capable to see the atrocities that the Kiev regime commits in its true colors. What those human rights structures are for if they don't see how beaches, city beaches are targetedly struck, killing people and children. The Western sponsors who supply Kiev with armaments must understand that they are directly responsible for terror against the Russian children, the elderly, women of our country, against the civilians. They are accomplices to the military crimes of the Zelensky regime. Now about the situation in Ukraine in general. Pushed by our forces on all the fronts, the Kiev regime, unable to do anything in the far front, the regime mired in shameless terrorist attacks against civilians and civilian facilities in Russia. Some 160 people were affected. 17 people were killed, more than 140 wounded, including 8 children. I'll give you only selected facts of the Ukrainian crimes. The Belgorod region on July 3rd and 4th. The drone attacks wounded at least 16 people, including 2 children. On July the 6th, on the Shebekino-Belgorod freeway, a drone attack killed 1 man and 1 woman. On July the 7th, following a drone attack in the village of Borisovka, 3 people were wounded, including an 18-month-old child. The Bryansk region, on July the 3rd, the drone attack against a civilian car in the village of Alashki, 1 man was killed, 1 woman was wounded. the Kursk region. On July the 4th, following a drone dropping explosive on a car in the village of Rizhevka, 1 person was killed, 2 wounded. The Lipetsk region, on July the 3rd, the debris of the drone took down by the air defense system killed a 75-year-old woman. 2 civilians were wounded. Zaporozhye region, on July the 4th, a drone attack on the village of Konstantinovka wounded 3 people, including 2 children. On July the 7th, following the shelling in the city of Vasilievka, a 19-year-old young man was killed, at least 6 people wounded. The Kherson region, on July the 4th, the Ukrainian Nazis attacked with a drone the central regional hospital in the city of Aloshki, destroying it. On July the 6th, they barbarically shelled against the building of the city hospital in the city of Novaya Kakhovka. The same very day, following the aggression of the Kiev regime, a 67-year-old woman was killed, a 61-year-old man was wounded. The Donetsk People's Republic, on July the 4th, Ukrainian Nazis struck with the HIMARS MLRS against Donetsk, killing 4 people and wounding 4 more people. The Lugansk People's Republic, following the terror attack organized by the Kiev Special Services on July the 3rd, the former mayor of the city, Manolis Pilavov, was killed. He was the mayor in 2014-2023. 3 people were wounded in Moscow region on July the 4th. The debris of the drones, Ukrainian drones, 2 people were wounded in the Sergeyev Posad region, the Rostov region. On July the 4th at night, in the village of Dolotinka, following a drone falling on a house, 1 elderly woman was killed. The Russian courts continue to give sentences to Ukrainian neo-Nazis and mercenaries. Ukrainian militants received long sentences. Evgeny Kalashnik, 16 years, Vladimir Gorbatka, 16 years, Sergei Kopchuk, 16 years, Alexander Prokopenko, 16 years, Vladimir Popovich, 16 years, Andrei Milentiev, 15 years, Nikolai Tesla, 15 years, Georgy Mikushev, 15 years, Sergei Smolko, 13 years, 14 years of in prison in the absentia were given to Georgian mercenaries Georgy Gokoladze, Gele Radze, as well as the militant with dual Switzerland, Israel citizenship, Matola Avidoran. They are wanted internationally. The investigative committee of Russia established that on January 24th, 2024, the Russian plane was taken down with the crew, Russian officers accompanying 65 Ukrainian POWs. Those giving orders are wanted internationally. The decision of Washington to suspend military supplies to Ukraine during the reviews of Pentagon depots made the Kiev regime and its European sponsors seriously worried. The Foreign Minister Sibiga said that the Presidential Office of Ukraine is prepared to rent air defense systems in Europe. We talked about the diplomatic ways to settle the situation in Ukraine. However, the West continues the escalation policy. The European bureaucrats continue with mercenary escalation policy. They don't care about ordinary European people. And they are shamelessly draining pockets of ordinary people. And this money go for killing children and civilians. The German Chancellor Merz continues to be hypocritical and try to justify the supplies of the terrorist cruise missiles. During the interview to our ARD TV channel on July the 1st, he pointed out the technical sophistication of this type of armaments. He said that the training takes at least 6 months. He said that if Berlin doesn't supply the terrorists to the Ukrainian army, it will be used not by German soldiers but Ukrainians. These words reveal the willing of the government of Merz to participate in deep strikes against Russia. The government in Sweden, to build up support to the Kiev neo-Nazis, decided to significantly cut down the humanitarian aid to the facilitation of international development to the poorest countries in the world. They told how democracy should be built so that people don't suffer. They are talking about human rights everywhere, but all that ceased in a second. They don't care about human rights. They don't care about people, especially those in need. They promised this aid. Those people expected this aid. So even this year, this ostensibly will help Stockholm to save some $177 million. As a result, the aid to the Kiev regime will reach $957 million in 2020-2025. Yet again, we would be able to understand that if they help those in need in Ukraine at the expense of those in need in Asia. So they help to build the country and to be fed. But this $1 billion will be used to kill as many people in Ukraine as possible. That's how they respect human rights. Reasons for such a generosity at the expense of those in need is cynical. They said that because the US expanded the financing of the developing countries, Sweden won't be able to rectify the situation alone that is already quite difficult. Ukraine remains a priority of the Swedish policy. In other words, Stockholm cares more about corrupt neo-Nazis in Ukraine than those poorest countries exploited by the West. However, overseas, they believe less and less in the success of the Ukrainian project. According to the Bloomberg, the American BlackRock investment company at the beginning of the year stopped looking for investors for investments into the Ukrainian Fund of Development. They plan to announce it during the conference on the restoration of Ukraine in Rome on July 10th and 11th. They want to rebuild Ukraine, but at the same time they want to give more money for lethal weapons that destroy and kill this country. The reason that they cited is the lack of interest amid the growing uncertainty about the future of the country. Earlier, they announced to attract some $500 million from the country's international development banks and other sponsors, as well as $2 billion from private investors. But we see that Americans who can evaluate investment risks decided to change their plans and not to invest into this pointless cost. It's not like we don't want to see Ukraine a prosperous, sustainable country was not only wanted, it is necessary for us, but we are well aware and understand that the militarization that is announced in the West is aimed not at building a stable, prosperous country in Ukraine, but to use it as a tool. As Foreign Minister of France recently said, Ukrainians ensure the Western, or probably only French, security. But I'll remind you, no one threatened them. Now about what is going on in the religious rights in Ukraine. On July the 2nd, Zelensky signed a decree to strip primate of the canonic Ukrainian Orthodox Church Metropolitan Onufry of his Ukrainian citizenship. And Zelensky is a person who declared the decommunization of the Ukrainian space. It turns out that the worst of the communist practices, the stripping people of rights to religious rights, to religion, to ideology and understanding of the world, takes place. It's the worst practice. Under the communist authorities, there were different things. Something was good, something was bad. But while Zelensky declared the decommunization in Ukraine and implement the worst practices, the pretext is the charges of the Ukrainian security service that he ostensibly, quote, continue to support the policy of the Russian Orthodox Church and its leadership and consciously counter the independence of the canonical Ukrainian Church from Moscow Patriarchate. He said that there's no room for people who oppose the Ukrainian independence in all its dimensions, including the spiritual independence in Ukraine. Then we should get rid of the Westerners there. It was them who made coup d'etats in Ukraine. They bribed Ukrainian officials. The West managed the Kiev regime, leaving people in Ukraine without democratic rights or freedoms. Zelensky and his clique of anti-church inquisitors, this community, so to say, they violate the religious freedoms in Ukraine. They strip Ukraine of the spiritual independence. They came up with this term as well to destroy this major religion in Ukraine with a shameful silence from the relevant international structures and majority of Western advocates of human rights. They resorted to another act of impunity to behead the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. They understand that it could be dangerous. On July the 2nd, the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine terminated the contract with the Ombudsman on protection of the state language, Taras Kremen. He said that he was willing to fulfill his duties, but he became such a notorious figure even for the modern Ukraine that the MPs of Ukraine dismissed him. Over the 5 years that he worked on this post, he gained a reputation of an ardent opponent of the Russian language. He supported the ban of speaking Russian during the breaks at schools, supported the cancellation of the studying of the Russian language, called on to get rid of the Russian titles of the populated areas in the countries, and he said, I quote, Ukraine is only for Ukrainians. By and large, he promoted an openly neo-Nazi mottos. The number of school children who studied Russian went down by almost 600 times, from 455,000 to 768 people. The parents understand what this means. This means repressions. He is proud of complaints and reports on the violation of the language legislation. According to him, since the beginning of 2025, more than 1,000 complaints were filed. It's something like a fairy tale, but it is the modern Ukraine. The majority of the complaints took place in Kiev, 582, the Odessa, 178, the Kharkov, 171, Dnipropetrovsk, 138, and Kiev, 54 regions.
They're proud of it. Despite the efforts of this Sprechen-Führer, the people do not rush to start speaking Ukrainian. They continue to speak Russian. And the efforts to separate the residents of Ukraine into the right and the wrong ones, as he said it, on the basis of the language, does not contribute to the protection of the state language, but directly violates the Ukrainian constitution that says that there is a ban on discrimination. And it guarantees the protection of the Russian language that they have not annulled it yet. It just splits this society, encourages people to spy and to inform on each other, to hate each other. The media says that this inquisitor will be supplanted by actor and film producer Mr. Zavarsky, who was against forceful Ukrainization of the country. He said that one should not impose the language, one should create motivation to learn the language. Well, he sounds like a decent, adequate person, but do not be deceived. In the political establishment, it is often the case when the person does not hold an official post, but then when he comes to this post, he starts voicing non-sound judgments. Remember, when Zelensky was running for the president, he was also saying that one should one should not care about the Russian language, let people speak it, but then he promised to revise the language legislation. But then other legislation bills were adopted, including the bill on the complete secondary general education, on indigenous peoples, on national minorities or communities of Ukraine, on preschool education that codify the discrimination of the Russian language. So one should not harbor hopes that the marginalized position that Russian and Russian-speaking population found themselves in, that this will change. One should not harbor hopes for that. Now, on the alliance, or as they call it, unity, solidarity, on July 2nd, Polish President Andrzej Duda, that is going to leave the office, signed a law that designates July 11th the Day of Memory of the Poles, dedicated to victims of genocide by Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists and Ukrainian Insurgent Army. Let me remind you that these structures have been designated as extremist ones, and they are prohibited in the Russian Federation. We're talking about the crimes against Poles during the Second Polish Republic. Kiev rushed to call this step as a stab in the back. But they refused to acknowledge the evidence. Not everyone is ready to put up with the Ukrainian nationalism that is on the rise. In vain, well, the consequences for the junta can be way worse. Warsaw is decisive and ready to block the participation of Ukraine in NATO and the European Union before Bankova can settle this sensitive issue of the massacres of the Poles in Volhynia. The elected president, Karol Nawrocki, has made it clear. Amid this, it is symbolic that we saw media reports on July 2nd about neutralization of a gang of Ukrainians that abducted illegal immigrants and extorted money under threats of murder and organ trafficking. Well, it seems like Poles would not want to wait until they become victims of Ukrainians that they themselves cultivated. We saw a significant decrease of Poles that want to see Ukraine in the European Union. June survey counted them at 35%, and 2 years ago it was 85%. Well, see, this is almost a 2.5-fold increase. So less and decrease. And so less and less people want to see Ukraine in European structures. Azov Brigade has been designated terroristic, and is banned. The neo-Nazi ideology and propaganda of total militarization has been propagated, so Germany has been paid attention to that. Concern has been voiced on July 5th by German media Junge Welt. It is noted that Ukraine does not have any fields or sectors that are free from influence of Azov. Well, neo-Nazis conduct military feasts and concerts in the children's camp Azovets. They educate children to handle guns, and their youth organization Centuria instills minors with the mentality, with the emphasis on learning nationalist movement of Ukraine's. Know all about it. We see overwhelming presence of Azov insignia in the metro stations of Kiev as well, when toys are bought. Remember, Alexander Alferov is a big fan of Hitler, was put to the post of the head of Ukrainian Institute of National Memory. It is a phenomenal, and I quote it, phenomenal triumph of neo-Nazi movement. I think that wasn't just used for the sake of it, but this is a citation, a quote from a deep past. I'd like to add that from time to time we see videos on the net where Banderite oath ceremonies are being given. These are young participants of Ukrainian Hitlerjugend that are taking place in this. The whole West should stand accused of willful neglect of Azov and similar neo-Nazi units within the AFU. They should stand accused of financing the Kiev regime that has completely been filled with this ideology and is propagated this ideology. So who receives help in Ukraine? From whom? From Germany, for example, who uses the money of their own taxpayers. The answer is evident. They're helping contemporary Nazis whose ideological forebears were hanged according to the verdict of the Nuremberg tribunals. The aforementioned facts are just another example that special military operation is relevant. The operation to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine, and the goals of this operation will be accomplished as per the leadership of Russia. Another topic that is connected to Ukraine, at the same time, it is connected to the topic of international organizations that should do something to prevent this dehumanization practices that is taking place on Ukrainian soil and to prevent it from taking bigger shape. Paris, July 6th to 15th. UNESCO World Heritage Committee. They will look at 3 properties from the World Heritage List. In 2023, they were inscribed in the list of objects under threat. What are we talking about? We're talking about the following properties: Kiev and related monastic buildings, Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, Lvov, the ensemble of the Historic Center, and the Historic Center of Odessa. It has become evident that the UNESCO Secretariat is biased in terms of the situation in Ukraine. Representatives and bureaucrats of this organization refuse to see the lawlessness in this country. Let me remind you that the memorials to the founder of Odessa, Catherine the Great, as well as Field Marshal Suvorov, have been dismantled, demolished by the Kiev regime, but Zelensky kept silence. Following this barbaric act, he commenced policies to conserve the heritage of Odessa, but it's nothing without those memorials. Maybe it was a connivance between the Secretariat of UNESCO and the Kiev regime. They said, well, just demolish these monuments under cover of night, which are directly connected with real founders of Odessa. Well, following that, I presume they said so in UNESCO Secretariat, we will codify this status without those monuments, and we will preserve that under the aegis of UNESCO. Draft decisions on these properties have been published on the official UNESCO web portal. They are framed in a politicized nature, and it has nothing to do with culture or history whatsoever. The committee is proposed to voice regret of the full-scale invasion of Russia to Ukraine, as they formulated, and a serious concern with regard to the detriment that was inflicted upon the Cathedral of Sofia during the attack on Kiev on June 10, 2025. Haven't they noticed anything else at the UNESCO Secretariat? Have they noticed that churches that were burned down, the plundered monasteries, have they not noticed persecution of representatives of Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Ukraine? Have they not noticed what they have done to the church and to the monuments of great figures that do not separate between Russia and Ukraine? They declared war on them. Haven't they noticed all of those acts? Such wording runs counter to the practice that has been established in the committee to not cite the sides of the conflicts. Decisions on the countries that are engaged in hostilities are taken as a rule with the wording voices concern with regard to the conflict that is taking place, because UNESCO is taking a different stance. If you want to talk about the countries, well, they should talk differently. They should should look at how Russia is preserving its cultural and historical properties on our new territories when they truly cherish all languages, of all ethnic groups. One should also look at the situation in Ukraine and compare these two situations, where they just beat the Russian language out of Ukrainians. That's where you would need to name the countries, but it has nothing to do with the mandate of the Convention Concerning the Protection of the World Cultural and Natural Heritage of 1972, and exceeds the authorities of the World Heritage Committee of UNESCO as its governing body. It contravenes the provisions of the Declaration of Principles to promote international solidarity and cooperation to preserve world heritage. It was adopted in 1972 during the 23rd session of the UNESCO General Assembly. We're talking about the need to preserve impartiality and to base the decisions of the World Heritage Committee of UNESCO, but the same abbreviation serves in the Russian language for the Club of Funny Guys and Girls. UNESCO, this committee should the decisions of the committee should be based on scientific notions and contribute to respectful dialogue and consensus. But it has all been, the Secretariat has been stripped of those things. Mr. Rutte, NATO Secretariat, NATO General Secretary. Let's look at recent statements of Mr. Rutte. He has voiced concerns regarding relations between Russia and China. They have stopped any learning and getting real educations. They just have fake documents, and they're building their careers on Russophobia. But Rutte should know that neither Russia nor China is a part of his mandate. We're not part of this alliance. Rutte versus Russia and China, we don't have anything to do with Rutte. But we care for his words, because his words is just another testament that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, whose secretariat he is heading, continues to conceive of the world as an arena of geopolitical confrontations to maintain its slipping global dominance of the collective West. Multipolarity, alternative centers, and mainstream centers of power and development, equitable and mutually respectful relations between states, all these things just lack in the mentality of contemporary NATO representatives. As far as the military cooperation between Moscow and Beijing goes, I'd like to dwell on this in detail. It is a truly important component of the Russian-Chinese comprehensive partnership and strategic cooperation in this new era. It contributes to ensuring security of our countries and to maintaining stability in key regions of the planet. When NATO representatives are talking about this so-called security that they should implement also through or via Ukraine, using Ukraine. But who was threatening you? Can you cite at least one document that was saying that somebody was threatening NATO? There are no statements like that. But when we are talking with the Chinese about our own security, we're talking about this knowing what we're talking about. We know the history. Because history shows that we have always been under attack. But we are using NATO documents, and our countries are cited there as potential adversaries of NATO. So I'd like to note the following. Our cooperation with China is implemented in strict compliance with the international law. It's absolutely transparent. It does not have a hidden agenda. It does have nothing to do with bloc and confrontation nature. It is not aimed against any third countries. We have close cooperation between the armed forces of Russia and China. It is based on deep trust. It has a special nature and unprecedentedly high level of interstate relations. It is not a union, but it exceeds the traditional nature of traditional alliances during the Cold War. That's why the notions of Secretary General Rutte that PRC's President Xi Jinping should or would call Russian President Vladimir Putin before attacking Taiwan, provokes our profound bewilderment and justified indignation. And of course, we are, wondering whether Mark Rutte is mentally healthy. Of course, we have concerns because of the mental state of General Secretary of NATO. What are we talking about? What kind of an attack if Taiwan is an integral part of China? Is that only our principal position? Not at all. This is our fundamental, unwavering position. As far as I know, all NATO countries recognize this fact. At the same time, they speculate on the admissibility of such manipulations. Verbal, linguistic, or mental manipulations. You name it. They constantly talk about Taiwan in separation from China. They speculate on the admissibility of violating the status quo between China mainland and Taiwan. They continue to sell arms to Taiwan, to deploy military trainers, and to test methods that have already been tested in Ukraine. Is it hypocrisy, double standards, or violation of international law? The idea to hold such talks between Russian and Chinese leaders reveals a deep misunderstanding of the essence of our strategic partnership on the part of NATO. Maybe they will stand aside from the statements of Rutte. Maybe, well, I don't know what will happen. That's a question to them. I'll remind you that Russia and China don't have any military bloc. We don't have any hierarchy. We preserve our sovereignty. We equitably and comprehensively cooperate. And we base our foreign policy decisions on our own